Hello and welcome back to SAS Bootcamp Week 6, Video 3. In this video, we are going to look at data visualization syntax within SAS, and we are going to look at how to generate plots. There are several types of plots you can generate within SAS. The most popular procedures for generating plots are either Gplot or SGplot, and really SGplot is perhaps the more powerful and the newer procedure. Gplot has been around for longer. But both Gplot and SGplot are pretty powerful and can produce manuscript-ready graphs straight out of SAS, if you would like, right? And as you are pursuing more and more complex plots and graphs for your manuscripts, you will find that you can really tap into the options within SGplot or Gplot, for that matter, to generate what you want. What I'm going to show today are some really simple examples of several types of plots. We are going to look at, for example, a scatter plot, a line graph, a bar chart, some box plots, box and whisker plots, and a bubble plot. As with the previous videos in this week, what I'm going to show you are basically a few examples, and will not really tap into every single option within these procedures. If you are interested in learning or exploring more options within these procedures, please go to SAS Help or just Google or use one of those textbooks that I shared with you guys to identify what are the different ways that you can generate these plots. For now, I'm going to get started with SGplot. We are going to work off of the m_stats dataset that we've been using for the past couple videos. And we are going to generate a scatter plot. So if you want to generate a scatter plot within proc SGplot, you just have to write proc SGplot, feed the data into the dataset using the data option, and then begin your one line of code with scatter. And in the scatter statement, you just have to define what is your x-axis, what is your y-axis. And you have to tell SAS what is the name of the variable that goes on the x-axis, the name of the variable that goes on the y-axis. And really, that's all you need. I'm going to comment out the rest of this code, show you guys what a basic scatter plot looks like. And here it is, right? So you've got alcohol use on the x-axis, opioid mortality on the y-axis, and SAS gives you a little bit of a scatter plot there. Now, if you want to step it up from here, for example, you can add this group option after a /, which basically will add some color to your scatter plot and break down what you're looking at, break down the points based on whether they belong to a state where the M status was equal to 0 or M status was equal to 1, and that is displayed as blue and red in this example. If you want to explore more options to make this work, so for example, some journals where I've published will not accept color images, right? They will only accept black and white images. If you have requirements like that, proc SGplot actually does have options where you can customize how you want to do that, how you want to do those two groups. So for example, instead of having both groups being displayed as little circles, you can have one displayed as a plus symbol or as a little star and the other displayed as a little circle, so you can tell which belongs to which group without having to rely on color to do that. Again, I'm not displaying all of those options in today's video. Next, you can generate a line graph within SAS using proc SGplot. The syntax is the same exact one as what we've just seen, except instead of scatter, you use the series command to do it. You feed a x-axis variable and a y-axis variable into it, and this is what you get. Now, this is a little bit of a mess because, as you can identify, on my x-axis we have the state variable, and the state variable having 50 different states listed on an x-axis can make this a little congested, if you will, and not very clear, but you can always go into proc SGplot's options in order to make that look better. Again, we are not going to do that during this video. Earlier, we used proc reg in the previous video to run regressions between a dependent variable and an independent variable. You can do that within SAS, and you can, instead of having the line graph, you can have the line of best fit within SAS. If you want to do that, you replace the series statement with the reg or the regression option. If you are doing this, be careful that the reg option cannot support categorical variables that have more than 2 categories. So at the most, you can only have on the x-axis a categorical variable with 2 categories. And here's your regression line. That's the line of best fit for all the options in your data set. The really interesting thing about the line of best fit is that if you add the group option, just like we did with the previous SGPlot statements, SAS will actually produce two regression statements, one for each group. And as you can see here in this data set, for example, it is showing that where M status is 0, where marijuana status is illegal, the relationship between opioid mortality and alcohol use goes in one direction. But if marijuana status is medicinal, then the relationship between alcohol use and opioid mortality goes in a different direction completely. Next, we are going to look at a bar chart. The syntax for a bar chart is slightly different from the previous syntax examples we've shown. In this case, we are using the H bar statement. H bar stands for horizontal bar. If you want vertical bars in your data set, in your output, for example, you use the V bar option instead. The variable immediately following the H bar statement is basically the variable that you will have those bar charts for. And in the response option, you will list the variable that you want to dictate the height of those bars, if you will. You can also use a group option here if you want to have multiple colors within your bars. So let me run it once with the group, once without the group, so we can see the difference. Okay, so you'll see here the H bar state basically made state the y-axis because we wanted the bars to be horizontal, which is why we use the H bar option. So here are all the 51 states and DC, for example, in the data set. And the height or the length of those bars is dependent on the opioid mortality, which we fed into the response equals syntax option within here. Now, if we add the group option to this SGPlot command, it will color the bars differently. It will color the bars blue for one value of M underscore status, and it will color the bars red for another value. Quick note, I know that for now, the x-axis and the y-axis actually represent OP underscore mortality, which is the name of the variable. When you're putting your graph onto a manuscript, you don't want the name of the variable, you want the x-axis to be labeled opioid mortality, deaths per 10,000 or something else like that, right? So you can add those labels as options within proc SGPlot. I will show how to do this in a moment. For now, we are just using the default, which actually just lists the name of the variable. Next, SAS also lets you get box and whisker plots. Box and whisker plots within SAS are just using the hbox command within proc SGPlot. So everything else with the proc SGPlot syntax still stays the same. Now you have hbox as opposed to hbar, and then the variable that you want to demonstrate in the box plot, you list that right there, OP underscore mortality. And if you want multiple box plots broken down by groups, instead of using the group option within the box plot, you use the category option. So here into the category equals option, I'm fitting the M status variable, which is the same one we looked at earlier. And again, hbox will give you horizontal box and whisker plots. Vbox will give you vertical box and whisker plots. So here's the horizontal whisker plot. And if you're not used to seeing a box and whisker plot before, this vertical line is the median. This little diamond is the mean. The edges of these boxes are the interquartile range. So this is the 25th percentile and the 75th percentile. These whiskers on either side of the box are basically 1.5 times the interquartile range on each side of the median. And SAS actually, by default, generates these little circles on the other side of the whisker, that are outside the whisker, which are actually your outliers. And you can generate that horizontally, or you can generate that vertically, as this example will show you right here. Okay, so that's box plots. I wanted to have a little bit of a fun, and I want to show a bubble plot. I have actually never generated a bubble plot for any project that I'm working on. They are really interesting ways to display your data. I've just not found that that was applicable to me. But let me walk you through what a bubble plot shows. The bubble plot is very similar to the scatter plot that we saw earlier, but with an additional option. The difference between the scatter plot and the bubble plot is that in a bubble plot, you will still have those scatter points exactly as we saw in the scatter plot, but the size of the bubble or the size of the dot that you see actually can be dependent on a third variable, which you can feed into SAS using the size equals option within the bubble statement, right? So you write a bubble statement with an x-axis, a y-axis, and then with the size equals option, you can dictate the size of the bubble to be dependent on a third variable. In this case, I'm using the insured percentage uninsured variable, which is INSR, to feed into the size. I still have the group option, so I want my bubbles to be colored either blue or red, depending on the value of M status for that given state. So here you see each bubble represents one state, and where that state's value of alcohol use and opioid mortality lie on this particular scale. And then the size of the bubble represents the value of the insurance variable, right? So the bigger bubbles display that there are higher uninsured individuals in that state. The smaller bubbles display lower uninsured individuals in that state. Again, I think it's an interesting way to visualize your data. I've just never had to use something like this for a manuscript or a presentation before. So those are some basic examples of how to use, how to generate plots within your within SAS. There are several other things you can do. You can generate regression lines, density plots, heat maps, high and low plot, and some other things. I'm not going to show every single one of those things within proc sgplot, but really they are a quick Google search away and are not very difficult to implement if you want to go exploring. The one last thing I want to show is how to generate manuscript ready graphs or plots out of SAS, because the previous ones I showed you were simple demonstrations. They were not quite manuscript ready. If you want to do a manuscript ready plot, I am showing how to do this using proc gplot. Proc gplot is different from proc sgplot. It's a little more ancient. It's also a little unique in that proc gplot is probably the only proc, of course with some more exceptions. It's one of those rare procs within SAS which needs both a run and a quit statement before it can function. If you only have the run or only have the quit, you won't get the output you're looking for. So you have to make sure you list both the run and the quit option. The basic proc gplot is actually fairly simple. You just list the plot statement along with the variables that you want, separated by the asterisk symbol, right? The variable on the left is the x-axis, the variable on the right is the y-axis. What I am doing is actually a little more advanced because I want to be able to get a plot that I can copy and paste directly into a manuscript. I am using this / option with v-axis and h-axis. What this v-axis and h-axis does actually is it tells you how you want SAS to format your vertical axis, your y-axis, and your horizontal axis or x-axis. So the name axis 1 and axis 2 are meaningless by themselves, but I've defined what axis 1 means using code written before the gplot code, right? So the gplot code itself is fairly simple, but if you want to customize your plot and you want to have all these better display of your x-axis and y-axis, you can do that using some option statements that you write before you run the proc gplot procedure. When you are using those option statements with proc gplot, please be careful to reset your options before every proc gplot. What will happen when you write these options procedures is that once you write these, they will apply to every single proc gplot that you write in the rest of your code. So as if you use the G options reset equals all button, they will get reset every single time so that you can redefine these options for every plot that you run within that SAS session, right? So I will always begin with G options reset equals all, which resets all the default options which resets all the options to their defaults. And then I will use my customization. So for example, under axis 1, I'm telling SAS, I want the axis to be ordered from 0.04 to 0.1. So the axis shouldn't begin from 0, it should begin from 0.04 and should go up to 0.1 by increments of 0.005. If you're wondering why I chose those particular numbers, that's just what made the graph look more presentable, if you will. You choose how you want to make this work. These are just the options I'm demonstrating as an example. And for axis 1, I want the label to be listed like this. Instead of the ALC_use, which is the name of the variable, I want alcohol abuse prevalence as the name or the X, if you will. And A equals 90 basically is an option for how to display that label. If you want to explore what other options you have, just go to SAS help and explore what other syntax options you have for axis 1 and axis 2 definitions. For axis 2, the only thing I'm changing is the label. I want the label opioid mortality in there. Finally, within proc gplot, I'm also defining the symbol 1 using the point label command. Basically, what this is saying is that when you have the proc gplot generate a scatter plot, which is what this plot option is doing. It is simply generating a scatter plot. Instead of generating little circles in that scatter plot, I want to customize it. And instead of generating little circles, I want it to fill in with the name of the state from the data set. And I want that to be displayed with this font size and with this font, and where the value equals none. If you want to explore what these options mean, again, please go to SAS help and explore them. I'm just trying to demonstrate an example of how to generate a manuscript ready graph. So here you see we've got alcohol abuse prevalence on the left, on the y-axis, and it actually is displayed meaningfully instead of ALC_use. Opioid mortality on the x-axis, and each little point on this scatter plot is actually listed by the name of the state itself, so that you don't have to wonder what state that dot is representing. Something like this is something I could put in a manuscript. Of course, most manuscripts probably require something a little more advanced than this one, but this is an example to show you really can generate a lot of variety and a lot of options with plots using proc gplot or proc sgplot within SAS. Thank you. That will be all for this video. We will come back and talk about macros.